He actually leaned forward like this and he went, "It is absolutely true. I am 10,000% sure." He did this with his hands. They went into my house and ransacked my house, and they went to my car and ransacked my car, and they brought me to their car and drove me to cantonment. That's why I changed my words from yes to no, talking about the real vaccine there, the yes to no, because I was just a patient and they intimidate me with all their actions and they force me to testify with a certain narrative that they want. And I figured that they want me to say that I am not vaccinated. I understand that giving a false testimony to the police is wrong, but at the time I was very fearful. I now know I'm in a court system and I'm not obliged to follow the same system as the police. And now after you said you have a direct line to me, referring to what the judge had said to Cedric possibly, I now dare to say that I accused the police. I also have no evidence because my phone was taken. I feel my citizen right is violated by their actions. After I had already said yes to taking the fake vaccine, I had to follow on with the inconsistency and say that I had taken it. But now that I'm in court and I'm under oath, I would like to tell the truth. The discussion goes very fast for a while. And then I pick up Lim saying, "Yes, that's why I said I make it up. I was shaken and panicked during the interrogation." These are his words. After a little back and forth with the judge, Lim also says, "The truth is that I didn't even see. I just anyhow say this one because I didn't want the session to continue. I just wanted it to end. I don't even know what I say, but what I said in the court is the true one." Basically, he was saying that he was so fearful, tired, and hungry, his words at different parts of the proceedings, as I've mentioned, with the police investigations, that he just wanted it to end. He has said the phrase "wanted it to end" several times in his testimony over a few days. Side note, by the way, if anyone is watching this from the mainstream media, can you please do some coverage with your professional style of recording and everything and whatever you're allowed? Because then it would make it easier for me to go get the facts from there. So please, instead of having me to type it out, you're the national media, please cover. This is an important case, I feel. My feeling. Hey friends, welcome back. There is a lot of information in this video, so hang on to your seats. But I will be reading a large part of all of this video for you. I've literally taken 3 to 4 hours to type it out properly from my 14 pages of notes from the court. So excuse me while I do not look at the camera for the most part. Sorry about that. Also, this is a work from home scenario, so do excuse any sounds from the family from the other rooms if there are any. Now I'll start with all the key points in case you want a quick summary first. Now, at the start of the day, Mr. Cedric Lim made a quick correction, and I'm just speaking in point form here because this really is a summary. Watch the rest of the video for the elaboration. He says, "I spoke wrongly about this point, so I wanted to clarify. This was about Ms. Zahara being present as a recorder, and he likely forgot because he dealt more with the other person who was the other recorder than this one." This was his explanation. Also, the signature he couldn't recognize earlier in the previous day's proceedings, which was Friday, August 29th, was probably his because he had made the corrections, according to him, the rest of the document. So he's saying now, today in September 1st, that the signature was probably his. Now, the next point is, he said at some point, "I didn't get a chance to read, but because there was a threat, then I just signed." And he also said, "There is no way that I don't sign this. I wanted to leave, so I just signed." Just to give you some context about his mind state and his own words and feelings when he was doing those police statements. The next point is that the sequence for the Ministry of Health statement was he spoke to Brian, who was a sort of investigation officer, police officer, in his words and Brian's words. There was a statement about Iris ko sabo you, which the officers or investigators told him. Photos were shown to him. He says he was riled up and resentful, his words, and he just gave the statement, his words. He said just give the statement, actually. The next point in the key points is on what jab he got. He says, "I basically didn't know if it's saline or what is inside. I wasn't even sure. I actually made it up on the spot because of the fear. I just make it up." His words. The next point about being offered a blood test. He had no objection, but in the end, he said, "But in the end," his words, "they didn't offer me a blood test." Also, he mentions that in one of his police statements where it says, "I have taken my meal," this is not true. It's like a template. These are his words. By template, I think he means that the police use like a template for the police report and then get him to make amendments. I'm assuming. I don't know what else the word template could mean there. Now, the next point is about an account of a police threat. And his words, he said, the officer at his house said, "Have you seen police whack people before?" Also, he says that his house and his car were ransacked. His words, He claims intimidation led him to stick to the no vaccinated story thereafter. His words. The next part, the next key point is about breadcrumbs, because the judge and the proceedings and prosecution mentioned the word breadcrumbs at several points. So there were similar lines. He said that there were similar lines on this topic. He said that there were similar lines across P39 and P41, the statements, where he says he made an effort and left breadcrumbs so people would later ask, and later on he went to elaborate that he felt safe to tell the truth in court now. Another point, another key point, is that he had a repeated stance, and this is the last one, where he denies the prosecution's suggestions in the cross-examination. And one of the statements, for example, that he said was, when the prosecution said that your accusations of the police are not true, I put it to you that the accusations of the police are not true. He replies, it is absolutely true. I am 10,000% sure. What I have said in the court, and this is another line from later on, what I have said in the court is the truth because I take my oath seriously. These were sentences he said very close to the end of the court proceedings and very close to each other amidst a couple of questions by the prosecution. Let's move on with the video. This is my part 2 video of September 1st's proceedings. I also want to mention before anything else to you guys to wait for September 2nd's video as well, because on September 2nd, it was a little exciting and frankly enlightening when Dr. Kwa's counsel cross-examined Mr. Cedric Lim, and he gave a blow-by-blow account of what happened outside his house when the police came there to interrogate him and take him to police cantonment complex, in his own words to the council. Stay tuned for that in September 2nd's video. If you'd like to subscribe and follow to stay tuned for tomorrow's video, that would help me out and keep this channel funded and going, so thank you if you do. So today, while I'm going to give you what happened in the second part of the day as per my notes, I also want to highlight some key points from earlier in the day which were not covered in part 1's video, also available on whichever social you're watching this on. This part 1's video was done rather quickly in between short breaks that we were given in the court sessions. I've split up all my notes into different sections. Also do note that I did not take down every single thing that happened that day. I'm not a court scribe and I cannot type that fast, but I took down a lot of it. And this is directly from those notes, just tweaked for punctuation marks, really. Not even, the grammar even has not been changed. I preserved his style of speaking in Singlish and sometimes in English. So there are a couple of key points and corrections he made, and these are the corrections. The first key point is that he said, when he said that the lady was not present in the statement to the Ministry of Health, which he said on 29th August, I did mention in a previous video that he said she wasn't present. I'll link the video below in the description, and in case I forget, it's the one with the YouTube title, "The Witness Said the Police Did What?" ? To find it, just hit the videos tab on my YouTube channel. It should be the third video, if this one that you're watching is the latest and the first one. Let's move on. So on 1st September, he clarified, and he said right at the start of court, I spoke wrongly about this point, so I wanted to clarify. This was regarding the lady witness who was there, Miss Zahara, the recorder, which is what we're calling her. He said he dealt with the other statement recorder more than he did with Miss Zahara, so he forgot that she was there. He also said, and this is the second point he wanted to clarify, that the signature which he had previously said on Friday was not his, did not look like his, which I did not cover in any video because it didn't seem that important at the time. He said it was his now because he was the one who had made the corrections in the statement, and he mulled it over and he looked at the rest of the corrections before concluding, and he said, yes, since I made all these corrections, this must be my signature, and sort of admitted that to the court that he was probably wrong about that too. Now, let's actually move on to part 2 of September 1st. This point is called Why He Signed a Certain Statement and on Being the Maker of the Police Statement. In my video with the thumbnail saying 1st September, Court Highlights Part 1, I had said that he didn't read the statement. The statement wasn't read back to him, but he was given a chance to read through the statement. However, Cedric then said in the court, I did get a chance to read, but because there was a threat, then I just signed. Those are his exact words. And then Investigator Tien, I believe the word is Tien, I'm not Chinese, so pardon me if I get that word wrong. So Investigator Tien, the word is correct, but the spelling might be wrong. I'm thinking it's T-I-A-N. So Investigator Tien, being the recorder for another statement, the prosecution asked if it was his signatures next to the amendments on that statement. The prosecution was basically trying to conclude and trying to summarize by asking about sections A25, A26, and A27 in the statement. And he was trying to explain that he now wants to ask about the whole statement. But Cedric wasn't quite understanding it. And what he thought, because the prosecution had not finished his entire question when he jumped in, I think what he thought was that he was being made to explain one of the paragraphs. So Cedric referred to the last line and went off on an elaboration. And Cedric said, which is not the question that the prosecution asked, but he said, "There's no way that I don't sign this. I wanted to leave, so I just signed." Okay, I thought it would be worthwhile to add that line in to explain his mindset a little bit in his own words. Then again, in a while, the prosecution was trying to conclude and they were trying to wrap this up and asked him, I believe this was the part before they got to the cross-examination. So the prosecution was trying to conclude and ask him that he was indeed the maker of the statement. And by the word maker, Cedric took it to mean that he intended to put all those paragraphs in there. So he started explaining why he didn't, but why he signed it anyway. He said, "The statement, yes, but there were some I didn't dare to change, to amend." These are his words. The judge stepped in to summarize and solve this whole scenario between the prosecution and Cedric and say, "Mr. Lim, we are listening to your testimony and what you're providing to us in terms of information." And he said, "We hear you, but because the statement, and for whatever reasons that you made it, it was made by you, we're referring to you as the maker of the statement." And my personal guess, me as in Zephyr, is that that's just for official reasons, to conclude the part and move on to the next part, that type of thing. At least that's my understanding as a layperson. He asked for Mr. Lim's confirmation. Mr. Lim confirmed. He said yes. Now, the next part is about the procedure and events during the recording of the Ministry of Health statement. So the prosecution asked, how did they record this statement from you? What was the process of recording the statement? And so Cedric answered, and these are his words. "There was this guy called Brian. He came to my house." He adds an additional point here. He says, "I was speaking to Brian." He says like a comma and then this part and a comma, and continues his sentence. So he says, "All the time I was speaking to Brian, he was telling me that he's an IO from MOH." Then he continues, "I asked, 'What's up?' He said he wanted to take my statement. I was wondering why he wanted to, since the police had already taken it. Then Cedric says, he asked me to go down to the Harbourfront office. I asked him why he was similar to the police, because his actions and questioning style was similar. I asked him if he was an ex-police or something. He said, sort of." These are Cedric's words. "He already had a preconceived notion of what I had said to the police. This is what I feel." Okay, so these are all Cedric's words at core. Then he goes on to say, "He said he was an IO, so I thought he's like police. I complied with going to the office. I went down there. There were a few people there with computers. Then he handed me over to this Zahara. Before this recording, I was speaking more to Brian. Before this statement, Brian was like talking. He was very interested in Iris Cole more than the doctor. Actually, more than the doctor. He asked me, 'You're in this situation now. Do you feel like Iris Cole sabo you since you're in this situation?' For those of you overseas who don't understand what that means in a Singapore context, sabo is just the short form for the word sabotage. Okay, a strong word if you ask me, sabotage, but we use that in Singaporean slang and colloquialisms and so on. And he continues, "Since you're in this situation," that's what the officer said to him. And so Cedric says, "This triggered my resentment towards Iris, because if Iris didn't introduce me to this doctor and this doctor hadn't asked me to choose saline, this wouldn't have happened. So he riled me up and I gave the statement, just like the police who threatened me and asked me to cooperate and answer properly, which I remembered. I knew I had to give this statement. And also because of my resentment and because he riled me up. Also during the statement, they showed me the photo of Dr. Gibson and they showed me Iris Cole's picture. Then they just put it in front of me. Then I also more angry, get me into trouble. So that's why I just give the statement. Also before the statement, Brian said, 'We are here to help you.' After he said, 'Iris sabo you,' he said, 'We are here to help you. So just cooperate with us.' Just like the police." And I'm putting in brackets that the word did. I guess that would make the sentence clearer. And so Cedric goes, "After they threatened, they asked me to cooperate. Because of my initial encounter with the police at my house before all the statements, when I say I am vaccinated, he doesn't accept it. He said, you ever see police whack people before?" As a question. "When my man speak to you, you better answer properly. So after that, because of that, and after that, so he said, so you take the fake vaccine or not?" So I said, yeah, fake vaccine. Because I felt there was no way back and I just have to go through this. And also because I resented Iris and the doctor. So I just decided to cooperate with them. Now the next point, hope you're enjoying this so far and it's making things clear for you. A side note, by the way, if anybody's watching this from the mainstream media, can you please do some coverage with your professional style of recording and everything and whatever you're allowed? Because then it would make it easier for me to go get the facts from there. So please, instead of having me to type it out, you're the national media, please cover. This is an important case, I feel. My feeling. The next point is Mr. Lim being asked about resentment. Okay, then the prosecution asked, you've said many things. Can you explain why you resented Mrs. Ko and Dr. Kwa? He replied, basically, like I mentioned before, I was going to take the vaccine and I was thinking, why did Iris Ko introduce me to this doctor? And why did she have to tell me all the things? Sorry, why did she have to tell me all this to change my mind? So I go to Dr. Gibson, and also I didn't request for any saline, but Dr. Gibson took it out. I didn't request for it. I didn't ask for it. I didn't even know about it. If all this didn't happen, I would simply go for a jab at Punggol Clinic and avoid all this trouble. I remember when the police interrogating me, they asked me, did you pay the doctor money or not? I said, no, I didn't pay the doctor any money. They also said, there are other patients who paid money. Are you sure you didn't pay money? How much did you pay? So they wanted to get it out of me. So I just said $70 per vaccine. In the first place, I never intended for this whole saline thing. So that's why I resented them for getting me into trouble for something I never asked. The next point is trying to verify which jab was possibly taken. That was the end of that previous section. The prosecution asked Mr. Lim, when were you presented with the option to choose a saline jab or the Sinopharm vaccine? When you were presented with the option to choose a saline jab or the Sinopharm vaccine, you chose the saline jab, correct? Cedric says no, not a saline jab. The saline was in a tube. Prosecution says you yourself had chosen the saline over the Sinopharm, right? That was your choice, right? Cedric says yes, but I didn't know what he was going to do after that. And that's the end of that section. Now here's a section that I managed to take down about the cantonment interrogations. I believe it's called Police Cantonment Complex at the area in Singapore called cantonment. As they were speaking really, really fast, and my typing speed is not that great, we're not allowed recording devices to the room. This is what I took down, a small part. Mr. Lim said, in the cantonment interrogation room, there were no cameras and I didn't want them to do anything to me. Also at that point, I was so tired and hungry that I just wanted to leave. And whatever I said, they wanted the opposite. So that's why I made it up. Cedric then points to the statements and refers to the judge and the prosecution to it, where it says, I have taken my meal. He says, this is not true. It's like a template. Personally, from what I know of the police report procedure in Singapore, because I've made police reports a few times for various things in my 38 years of life. Recently, my Meta accounts were hacked. I'll link the playlist above. It was quite a scenario. I did a public campaign outside their office. I already got them back, but it was painful at the time. So here's what I know. You tell the police what happened. They type it out, right? At least this is the way it happens in police stations, that you find around your neighborhoods. They type it out, they get you to read it, make amendments if you need to, so it's fully accurate according to you, till you are satisfied, and then they ask you to sign it at the end. So this next part, was an exchange between the prosecution and Cedric Lim, which drew laughter. I thought it would be interesting to throw this in as well, which is quite interesting. So he was talking about the statement recorded with Miss Zahara as the recorder, and this would be the Ministry of Health statement. So the prosecution says, is the time recorded at the start and ends of the statement recording accurate? Mr. Lim says, yes, it's accurate. The prosecution says, and when you gave the statement, you were aware of the seriousness of giving the statement to investigating officers from the MOH, right? Lim says, this one, I'm not sure. The prosecution says it states at the start of the statement here, and then he reads a warning and a sort of briefing and explanation about COVID-19 vaccination investigations and so on, which apparently appears at the top of this document. I haven't seen the document and we don't have access to it, but they do. And maybe the accused do and the lawyers do. I'm not sure how the court system runs in that regard. But they were talking about it in court and both of them were looking at it. And I believe the judge has a copy too. And then he continues and says, and this warning was given to you, right? So you were misrepresenting the facts. Lim says, unintentionally misrepresenting, which drew some laughter from the crowd. And then the prosecution says, how is this unintentional, Mr. Lim? How is this unintentional? And Lim says, because I had already given the police statement. And then if I changed it, it wouldn't be the same anymore. So I felt I had to give this. The prosecution says, In relation to the Ministry of Health statement, can I confirm who was in the room with you? Was it Zahara Binte Ibrahim? Personally, me making the video, I could be wrong, of course, but I believe this is the spelling because this is not public knowledge again, so I can only guess. I'm thinking it's Zahara space Binte space Ibrahim. I did a Google search for her. There's somebody that comes up on LinkedIn who works for the Ministry of Health, but that's a Jahara Ibrahim with a J. I'm not sure if that's her account or if it's somebody else. But anyway, I just wanted to do a search to see if indeed that would be the right name, but there's no clue on Google. Next, Lim replies, I can't recall her face, but I think it was a Malay lady. Yeah, he says, yeah. And after that was when they moved into the cross-examination, because things had finally been confirmed by Mr. Lim to the satisfaction of the prosecution and the judge, in whatever legal fashion they're following, which is beyond my knowledge legally. You can ask a lawyer. So the next section is about whether he knew what jab he received. The prosecution asked him to explain a certain inconsistency. The questioning at this point was about what he was injected with. And Cedric's reply was, I basically didn't know if it's saline or what is inside. But because I had already said this, I had to continue with this inconsistency. I believe here they're referring to the police statements. And the prosecution reads off the statement, I believe, with a phrase and referring to Cedric's words, which he said, he injected saline solution into me, not the vaccine. And then close inverted commas, right? And then he asked Cedric, do you agree that this is inconsistent with your testimony in court? Cedric replies, just now I have explained, I wasn't even sure if the doctor gave me the actual jab or the saline jab. I actually made it up on the spot. And he was referring to him saying he was injected. Yeah, I actually made it up on the spot. And then later on, he went on to elaborate after a few sentences. They did a bit more questioning and then he elaborated on the reason. And he says, because of the fear, these were his words, because of the fear, I just make it up. After a while, in the same proceedings section, in the same section of court proceedings, he says, the police offered me a blood test and I had no objection because I wanted to know if I was vaccinated as well. But in the end, they didn't offer me a blood test. Further on, and I'm just cherry picking here from some parts of the proceedings in that same section of the day, he says, I don't know if the doctor injected me with the saline solution, and I also didn't know if they injected me with the Sinopharm vaccine, but they only asked one. That's why I answered one. If I may interpret his words, I personally think he means that they were asking for which he took, in the sense like pick one, was it this or this? That's what he's trying to say the police were asking. And hence, he didn't say something like what he's claiming is now true in court, which is that he doesn't know and that it could have been either. So he just picked one, the one he thought the police wanted him to go with. That's my interpretation of his Singlish. In another part of the proceedings, the judge says, Mr. Lim, you said you were fearful, but you tried to leave some bread crumbs. Can you explain why you were able to do so even if you were fearful? And he refers to a paragraph and says, A8. I understand that you said A8 was true when we compare A8 and A5. When we compare A8 and A5, we would be able to see the inconsistency. After a little back and forth with the judge, Lim also says, the truth is that I didn't even see. I just anyhow say this one because I didn't want the session to continue. I just wanted it to end. I don't even know what I say, but what I said in the court is the true one. Basically, he was saying that he was so fearful, tired, and hungry, his words at different parts of the proceedings as I've mentioned, with the police investigations, that he just wanted it to end. He has said the phrase wanted it to end several times in his testimony over a few days. The next point is about injections and liquids. Now further on in another part, the prosecution proceeded to ask something about the injection and the liquid, whether he felt liquid or a flow or something like that would make it seem like an injection. As is the normal feeling when you're getting an injection, I presume. You feel liquid entering your body and so on. Personally, I've felt it, when sometimes the injection feels warm or whatever. Lim says, if you ask me about liquid, I have no idea, but I felt a pressure. But some injections, it's worthwhile to mention that sometimes when I was younger, I would feel the warmth going in. But as I've gotten older, when they inject me, I don't know if I'm going numb or what it is, but when people inject me, this is just my personal view and experience. I look at them and I go, okay, so when? And they go, it's already done. I'm like, oh, okay. So I had the same thing for my wisdom tooth operation, just January 2025. So my memory is pretty fresh in this area. He actually, the numbing injection that went straight into my gums, I didn't feel a thing. So I don't know if that's just me because I'm on a lack of sleep regularly because of my media career and work, or that's just the way adults feel or kids feel different. I'm not sure. But the last time I felt a warm liquid go through my hand was when I was a child. Just worth saying that, I think. Lim says, if you ask me about liquid, I have no idea, but I felt a pressure. The discussion goes very fast for a while. And then I pick up Lim saying, yes, that's why I said I make it up. I was shaken and panicked during the interrogation. These are his words. Now, the next section is about acting professional, and I believe to ascertain the reason for the fear. The judge and prosecution are trying to find out, I believe. Or at least the prosecution is. The prosecution refers to one of the recordings and he says, was there any reason for you to be fearful? Do you agree she acted professionally? I believe the prosecution was talking about one of the recorders who was recording the statements. And Lim says yes. The prosecution says, then what reason is there for this recording to not have a true story? And Lim says, Ko Chia Le, and I'm assuming the spelling is K-O-H space J-I-A space L-E, because I don't have the recordings, I don't have access to the court transcript, and I'm not Chinese either. But that's how it was said. Ko Chia Le was, at least that's how it's pronounced, was one of the officers that ransacked my house. The prosecution says, but she wasn't one of those who intimidated you, right? Lim says in Singlish, I scared the officers, they whacked me. For everybody from overseas, that's not him explaining that they whacked him. That is Singlish for, I'm scared that they would whack me, or they could whack me, or they may whack me. And then he says, I don't want to be one of those who get whacked. Prosecution says, there was no threat made to you, correct? Lim says, disagree. There was absolutely a threat, and I'm 100% sure of it. The prosecution tried a few other questions and a slightly longer discussion with Mr. Lim, and Mr. Lim replied with, what I have said in court is true. And then later on at another part, the judge asked, at the time when the threat was being administered, you said that you believe you were vaccinated, but you were also unsure, right? You said that because the officer threatened you. You said that you were unsure. But then he continues to elaborate. Cedric continues to elaborate and explain what he was trying to tell the police officer. So he says, I told him I was vaccinated, and these are his exact words. He didn't accept it, so I went along with the no story. I was scared. He ransacked my house, so I decided to go along with the story. I wanted to leave the police station and get it over with. Then I covered this in the video for part 1, and I want to say this because I explained that he said he was scared and intimidated, but let me give you a breakdown of the section where he explains it and says how secure he is in court to actually tell the truth. So here's a section for you guys to ponder on. The prosecution says, in your evidence, you had claimed that you didn't know what you were injected with. But in these words, and he quotes, after my saline jab at the clinic, it would show that you know what you were injected with. Do you agree this isn't consistent? And Lim says yes. And the prosecution says explain, and Lim says I will explain. He goes on to say, there was a second interview with the police. I was sticking with the story from my first interview. I said the dosage can be adjusted by body weight and so on, he explained. He elaborated and they went back and forth. After a while in the discussion, he said, they wanted me to explain this better. And he says they wanted him to explain the word better, which I believe was from his statement or something to that effect. Then Mr. Lim says, after taking the jab, I understand what the word better means. And Mr. Lim says, yes, this is what the police wants me to say. They want me to say the saline is better. So I continued to say this to follow the previous one. This is him explaining the inconsistency. There was quite a lot of laughter in the court from the audience because it seemed like they were repeating the same points, both the prosecution, as he probably needed to for his case, and the witness in terms of his answer. Both of them were repeating. It almost seemed like they were repeating the same question and answer thread again and again, which eventually led to laughter from the court. I mean the audience, the public audience. By previous one, he's referring to a statement he had made before the one in question. The prosecution went on to say, you said, I just on the spot say previously, quoting Lim's words. And prosecution continues and says, now that I refer you to the statement, you are saying both the on-the-spot answers happen to be exactly the same. And Lim says yes. And the prosecution says, and so both of your on-the-spot answers are exactly the same. And Lim says yes, both are the same. Lim goes on to elaborate and says, I want to say again that what I'm saying in the court is true. There is no threat or coercion right now, so I'm telling you the truth. The prosecution then proceeds to ask about another officer called Tian Hai Kwa, or some such name. Again, I'm not Chinese and I don't know the exact spelling and I don't have access to court documents. So I'm guessing it's something along the lines of TIAN space HAI space KWA. I apologize sincerely to the court and everybody else, and including the officer, if that's the wrong spelling. That's my best guess. Maybe there's a H at the end of Kwa, so KWAH or something QUAH perhaps, I'm not sure. Prosecution asks, was the conduct by this officer professional or not? And Lim says, yes, but I wanted to maintain the same story. And the judge then continues to ask, if you had no pressure from this officer, then why did you maintain the same story? Lim says, because it's like a rabbit hole. I just want to maintain the same story, finish it, and get it out. Now and get out. According to him, leaving the police station or wherever the interrogation was taking place. And he goes on to tell the judge, now that you extend the line to me, then I dare to tell, explaining that he feels safe with the judge and now he dares to say what he actually means or what actually happened. And then the rest of the day continued with more and more questions about inconsistencies, and Mr. Lim continuously saying that he agrees with the prosecution that there are inconsistencies between his earlier police statements and MOH statements as a whole versus the court testimony, which is different. But I guess that's procedure for the prosecution, and so he continues. This is the next section, that's the heading. Explaining a particular statement with the word believe and the exchange with the police officer outside his house. Just so you guys know where we are in the video, we're at page 9 out of 14. Let's go. So in Cedric's words, when the officer outside my house asked me if I'm vaccinated, I said, yes, I believe I am. Now I will explain what I mean by believe. After the jab, the doctor gave me a gauze. What I mean by gauze is an alcohol swab. These are Cedric's words. And after that, he shook our hands and said, congrats, you're vaccinated. I was thinking that he could have jabbed me with the Sinopharm and tricked me, or actually just given me the saline. That is why I don't know. So here in the last few sentences, he went off on a little story about the doctor, just to explain some context, and then it comes back to the officer outside his house asking him a question. To recap, when the officer outside my house asked me if I'm vaccinated, I said, yes, I believe I am. And then he explained what he meant by believe. Okay? Now he goes and continues with the officer. He says, the officer looked at me and said in a gangster tone, and to put it very specifically, he was not shouting as it was late at night, but he was warning me with a very stern look. Have you seen the police whack people before? I said no and shook my head. He said, when my man asks you, you better answer properly. So he asked me if I took a fake vaccine, and I said no. He didn't. He didn't accept my answer, and so I said, yeah. Different parts of the testimony, he did say that he changed the answer to say yes, he took a fake vaccine. So I'm assuming that's what the yeah means at this part. Then they went into my house and ransacked my house, and they went to my car and ransacked my car, and they brought me to their car and drove me to cantonment. That's why I changed my words from yes to no, talking about the real vaccine there, the yes to no, because I was just a patient, and they intimidate me with all their actions, and they force me to testify with a certain narrative that they want. And I figured that they want me to say that I am not vaccinated. I understand that giving a false testimony to the police is wrong, but at the time I was very fearful. I now know I'm in a court system and I'm not obliged to follow the same system as the police. And now after you said you have a direct line to me, referring to what the judge had said to Cedric possibly, I now dare to say that I accused the police. I also have no evidence because my phone was taken. I feel my citizen right is violated by their actions. After I had already said yes to taking the fake vaccine, I had to follow on with the inconsistency and say that I had taken it. But now that I'm in court and I'm under oath, I would like to tell the truth. The next section is, I've titled it The Same Thing Again and the Imaginary Saline Vaccine. At one point, Cedric actually said, and for further questions, he said a few times, at least 2 times, but way more. He said, it's the same thing, just like I explained earlier, it's the same thing again. And then the prosecution went on to clarify what Iris had said over the phone to Mr. Lim, and Mr. Lim agreed. And they were talking about, this was a rather interesting part before the prosecution asked for a break, and this is how it went. Mr. Chong said, he clarified what Iris had said over the phone, and Lim agreed. And the prosecution, Mr. Chong said, so when you got to Dr. Kwa's clinic, you would have been concerned about what you were going to be vaccinated with, correct? And Lim says, yes. And the prosecution says, and you were very clear about the options you were presented with at the clinic, right? And Lim says, what do you mean presented? If you see, at first I opted for Sinopharm, but bringing out the saline was later. And the prosecution says, okay, so ultimately you were given a choice between saline and Sinopharm, and there was no option to pick body-adjusted Sinopharm, correct? Inside the clinic? Question mark. And Lim says, yes. The prosecution says, so you would be concerned about what you would eventually be injected with given all your health considerations, correct? So when you were given saline by the doctor, he would have observed the jab, correct? This part of what the prosecution said is me paraphrasing. And then Lim says, I was concerned, but I didn't look. When I take injections, I don't look at the needle. The prosecution says, I put it to you that you were certain that you had been injected with saline. You told this to the police thrice. And Lim says, that was me imagining what a fake saline injection would be like. And I also had to go along with the same story. I had to go along with what I had told the police. I tried to make it all the same. Now, the next part, the last few pages, I'm calling it end of day judicial clarifications about P41, MOH, and breadcrumbs. And then towards the end of the day, the judge says, Mr. Lim, when you were recording P41, which is the MOH statement, was the threat administered by the senior officer still operating in your mind? And Lim said, yes, I didn't dare to change also. I stick to the same. And the judge says, although the officer conducted it professionally and she was not a police officer, and Lim says, that one was the guy Brian. And I asked him, are you a police officer? For everyone from overseas watching who doesn't understand Singlish, when Lim says, that one was the guy Brian, what that one was the guy means in English is that the reason or the cause or in relation to. So when he says that one, he's referring to what the prosecution has asked. And when he says was the guy, is giving him sort of the solution or the answer. So if I may paraphrase in correct English, it would be something like, regarding your question about that, the reason for that or the next explanation for that, which I'm going to give, is about the guy Brian. That's what it means. Okay? So he proceeds to say that one was the guy Brian, meaning, like I said, it has because of Brian, or rather it has to do with Brian, would be my best translation from English to English. And that's what he elaborates on next. And he says, that one was the guy Brian, and I asked him, are you a police officer or not? A police officer? And he said, sort of. That's why when this lady recorded, I stick to the same thing. And the judge says, remember when I asked you about the breadcrumbs earlier in A39, about him poking and not pressing down? That was the first time you left that A8 breadcrumb, right? This was January. And Lim says yes. And the judge says, if you look at P41 on 2nd of March, when this was being recorded, were you shown P39 and P40, referring to the earlier statements, the police statements? And Lim says, no, but I remember more or less. And then the judge then says, paragraph 3, third page from P41 of the MOH statement, it says, after Dr. Kwa drew the syringe, he injected it into my left arm. However, he didn't inject me with the saline solution. The judge goes on to say, later on, after a bit of talking, says, after a bit of communication between the three of them, he says, later on, you said the same thing in another statement to confirm you weren't shown P39 when P41 was being recorded, right? And Lim says, I wasn't, but I was able to remember. And the judge says, so after 1 month plus, you were able to remember, even though the breadcrumbs are almost exactly the same? For those of you who need some context, the breadcrumbs was because he told the judge and the prosecution a few times in the last couple of days during this case that he had tried to leave some clues so that somebody would eventually find these statements, would hopefully question him and realize that, he was under some kind of duress, or like he said in his own words, a threat and an intimidation and so on and so forth. And maybe one day ask him what the true story is. So that's what the judge is referring to when he says breadcrumbs, just to let you guys know who weren't in court. And so now, basically the judge is asking, how are the breadcrumbs almost exactly the same in two statements, even though the statements are 1 month apart? And Lim replies and says, yes, I made an effort because I didn't want to be wrong. Lim then says, Judge, can I say something? And the judge says, sure. And Lim says, the reason I want to leave this breadcrumbs is for people to ask me, for people to notice and to ask me, because when I attended the second one, I was fearful and under the influence of people who wanted me to say certain things. So now when I come to court, I dare to say now, and this was almost done in a pleading, soft, gentle, and grateful tone. And then towards the end, at about 4:03 p.m., resumed after a very short break, the prosecution asked questions about some procedures inside the clinic. Prosecution asked if Lim had been in touch with Gibson Kwa since, and he was trying to basically put it to Mr. Lim that his statements to the police were true. And Mr. Lim kept denying. And Mr. Chong, the prosecution, tried to summarize with multiple long statements. But here's a select one that I could type because it was towards the end. And I had taken a break from typing for a while. I couldn't record all of them because I couldn't type fast enough. I apologize for not taking down every single thing in the court. A rather impossible task for me, but I tried my best. And so Mr. Chong said, I put it to you that your allegations about the police are not true. That was one of the final, sort of lines that they said in this cross-examination. And Mr. Lim raised his volume a little bit and said it with an air of finality. He said, he actually leaned forward like this and he went, it is absolutely true. I am 10,000% sure. He did this with his hands. And then he sat back. And I think this was one of the last lines. He said, I put it to you that all your testimony in court is meant to distance yourself from possible penalties and responsibility. And Mr. Lim replies and says, disagree. What I have said in the court is the truth because I take my oath seriously. The judge then asked Dr. Gibson's lawyers if they wanted to cross-examine. And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, that's what happened the next day on the 2nd of September. But here's where my notes end for this 1st of September. So I hope you guys enjoyed that and hopefully provides you some enlightenment for those of you who are not able to be there. This is just me reporting what I managed to take down accurately in terms of notes and a little bit of explanation from my end to help you guys understand what you're listening to in the notes, as some of them are sections and this is not a full transcript from morning to evening, obviously, because I can't type that fast and I'm a human being and I get tired. Please subscribe to this channel or social page and hit like on this video if you liked it. Comment down below. It really helps. If you'd like to support me and the channel in some way or the other, share it with people who want an accurate account of some of the things that have happened in the court, which I've taken down. And there'll be another video regarding the events on the 2nd of September, which was the end of this tranche of the court proceedings. And the next tranche of the court proceedings will be on 15th of September. I believe court 15C, but do search the website at the Singapore State Courts. So make it down to the court if you like. It's public and let's hope that the truth gets out there. And as I've said in other videos, the spiritual ones. In the first video I made on this case, and also a recent one that's going to be coming up about spirituality and the spiritual significance of this case. So check that out if you haven't, if it's already live. I hope we can all heal and learn and grow from this incident and from this case. As I would urge, as a spiritual guide and mentor, I would urge everybody to grow from this, from the government right down to a citizen watching this, to the accused, to the lawyers, to even myself. We're all learning about life and growing together at the same time. And it is not a good attitude, in my personal humble opinion, to say that I'm a better human being than you. And this goes for anybody watching this video and every citizen and human on earth. I don't personally believe that there's any such thing. And the reason I'm saying that line is to urge everybody to understand that any good spiritual message or learning point that comes your way is something you can learn from. I'm not going to use the word should, because in spirituality, we don't say that. So I'm not handing out instructions here to anyone. But we say could, and that's your choice, obviously, because you have free will. But I would urge strongly on a personal level, everybody who's watching this video and whose attention it comes to learn and grow from this matter and see how we can build a fairer, kinder, loving, and more humane society for all of us. Thank you so much. Wherever you're watching this, please subscribe and follow to stay tuned for tomorrow's video as well, because in September 2nd, it was a little exciting, frankly enlightening, that when Dr. Kwa's counsel cross-examined Cedric Lim, Mr. Cedric Lim, he gave a blow-by-blow account of what happened outside his house when the police came there to interrogate him and take him to police cantonment complex. So stay tuned for that in day 2's video, and I'll provide that detail there. Thank you for watching. If you scroll to the end of this video after not tolerating the first 5 seconds of the video and went, where's the summary? Right at the start. Go back to the start of the video. The summary is there. Take it easy.